Hi, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make use of a background receiver in native Android, so that way you can run tasks on certain intervals while your app is in the background and perform activities. For example, you could use this to download data from a remote web server on an interval of, say, every 30 minutes. There's a lot of different things you can do with this, and it's quite nice. This tutorial it's actually going to be composed. There's going to be three classes involved. There's going to be a main activity class. There's going to be a background receiver class, and then there's going to be a service class, which is launched from your broadcast receiver class. So let's go ahead and start things off by creating a fresh Android project from our command line. Notice in this tutorial I'm going to be using only the command line and a text editor. If you're familiar with IDEs such as Eclipse or Android Studio, things might feel a little different for you. I'm sorry, but it shouldn't be too hard to follow. So let's go ahead and start by creating that new project. We're going to go Android create project. Oops. We're going to give it a target of 14. We're going to give it a name of example project. We're going to give it a path of example project right on the desktop because I'm currently navigated into on my desktop. We're going to say that the main activity is example activity. And last, we're going to say that the package is com.nrboy.example project. You can name it whatever you want. Oh, not a valid target. Let's go ahead and see if I have 19 installed. I forgot which one I have installed. Not a valid target. So I did an Android list targets here, and what I'm going to try now is I'm actually going to try, say, target 5. For whatever reason, my targets weren't what I thought they were. They might have changed in an update somewhere. Alright, so we've now created it on our desktop. Let's go ahead and navigate into that project with our command line. And what we want to do now is, again, since I'm using a text editor, let's go ahead and open up our project in the text editor. For example, let's go ahead and just open up the root. So now go to your source, com.nrboy if you followed my naming convention, and you'll notice we have example activity.java, which is good. We also need to create 2 more files inside that directory. So let's go ahead and add a file called alarm receiver.java, as well as background service.java. And that should be good. So let's go ahead and start things off. We're going to go ahead and start things off with our alarm receiver class, because it is the smallest of the 3 that we're going to be working with. So let's go ahead and set it up correctly. Package com.nrboy.example. Well, in our case, example project. We're going to say import android.app, import android.content, and import android.os. I'm going to say public class alarm receiver, and we're going to extend the broadcast receiver. Alright, the final thing we want to do in here is we want to override a function called onReceive. It's part of the broadcast receiver class. So we're going to say override, and then we're going to say public void onReceive. Oops. We're going to pass it a context, an intent, and then So now we got to fill the contents of this class, or of this function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say intent background, and this is actually going to represent our background service, which we're going to create next. So background equals new intent context, and then background service dot class. Again, we're going to be creating. We've already created the background service dot Java, which is going to represent this intent. If you don't know what intents are, I suggest you go ahead and read about them online, but you won't need to know too much about them for this tutorial. So the next line we want to do is context dot start service. So now every time the alarm receiver fires, it's going to start the service, the background service that we just declared in here. So with that said, now let's go ahead and jump into our example activity. We're going to actually work on triggering that alarm service. So what we want to do here is we want to go, let me clean this up because the brackets drive me crazy. Let's go ahead and create a private context variable because we're going to be using it in our app here. We also need to extend, or wait, not extend, we also need to import a few things. So let's go ahead and, for simplicity, let's just go turn these into wildcards. You can go ahead and clean them up as necessary later. Import android.content.star again. Alright, so back into our onCreate, what we want to do here is we want to say this.context equals this. And we're doing this because if we try to keep passing around the this variable inside of our services, sooner or later we're going to run into some trouble. So I've found that it's best to store the current activity inside of the context variable. So let's go ahead and continue down the line. We're going to say intent alarm equals new intent, this context, and we are going to pass it the alarm receiver class, which we just finished creating. The next thing we want to do is we want to do a check to see if our alarm receiver is currently active. Because if we've already set up the alarm, we don't want to do it a second time. That can cause all kinds of drama. So we can do that by doing the following. Boolean alarm running, and we can say pending intent dot get broadcast receiver. Oh, not broadcast receiver, just broadcast, I'm sorry. And then we can say this dot context 0 alarm, which is what we just created in the intent. We're also going to say pending intent dot flag note create, and we are going to close that off and say not equal to null. So that will give us a true or false variable in return. So the final thing is now we're going to see if what happens if it is and isn't running. So if alarm running equals false, so it's not running. So that means that we have permission to set it up now. So we're going to say pending intent equals pending intent, and I can never spell it for some reason, dot get broadcast this dot context 0 alarm 0. Now we're going to say alarm manager, and then we're going to call it alarm manager as well. We're going to cast it as an alarm manager just for safety here. Get system service context dot alarm service. So, and then our final line, I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit of what we're doing here after I type this final line out. So we're going to say alarm manager dot set repeating alarm manager dot elapsed real time wake up system clock dot elapsed real time, and then we're going to go ahead and give it a time to repeat on. We're going to say 15 seconds, which is 15,000 milliseconds, and then we're going to pass it the pending intent that we created above. Alright, so what we're doing here is we are getting the alarm service, and then we are kind of hijacking it to run every 15 seconds. It's going to run our pending intent, which in our case, the pending intent is the alarm service, and it's going to continue doing that until we tell it to stop. All right. So with that said, we can actually go into our background service and start that creation process. So let's go ahead and start creating the package here. Envoy example project. We're going to import the usual. Import Android. I don't know why I did iOS. It should be OS. Sorry. Content star. So now we're going to do public class background service extends. It's going to extend the service class. All right. So we're going to have two private variables here. We're going to have a Boolean that represents if the service is currently running. The reason why we're doing this is because say you have a long background process that happens in the background and it may not finish in time before the alarm runs again. We want to only run our tasks if the service is currently stopped. So that way we don't end up with 100 different threads that are draining the battery and blowing up the device. So we're going to do a private context context. Now we're going to start making our functions here. Override public iBinder, on bind intent. And a lot of this stuff isn't going to do anything. It's not going to be served in the purpose of our example, but if you don't add it, it will complain. So for example, this isn't going to do anything for us. However, this next one is pretty important. We're going to override the onCreate. Public void onCreate. We're going to give the context this, as usual, because it performs better that way. We're going to say this is running equals false because we haven't started running it yet. And we're going to say this background thread, which I haven't created, I forgot, equals new thread my task, which we're going to create the runnable for this task in a second. So let's go ahead and create that background thread. So we're going to say private thread background thread. All right, now that our onCreate is done, we can continue down the line here. We are going to skip to our onDestroy. So we're going to override it again. All of this stuff is going to be overrides. Public void onDestroy. This dot is running equals false because it's no longer running. We're destroying it, and that's all there is to the onDestroy. The next thing that we want to do is we want to do the onStart command, and this onStart command is very important because this is what the alarm receiver is going to activate. every time it hits it. So we're going to say override public int on start command intent flags and start ID. So in here, like remember we created the on running, or not on running, is running boolean. So we're going to see if it's running. So if this is not running, then we can proceed to say this is running equals true because we're starting it. And then we're saying this background thread start. We're starting the thread that we had created in the onCreate. And then if it's already running, we're going to ignore it, and we're just going to return sticky in the end because that's what this expects. All right. So the last function that we want to create in this is the myTask. It's the runnable for the thread. So let's go ahead and say private runnable myTask equals new runnable. And we're going to say public void run because that's what it expects here. We're overriding it. And we are going to say do something in here. And we are going to do stop self when we're done. And that's going to initiate the onDestroy. So for testing purposes, what we're going to do here is we're going to have it print something out. We're going to say system.out.print line in all caps so it's easy to find. We're going to say background service is running. All right, so we're going to save that. The final thing that we want to do here is we want to enter our AndroidManifest, and we need to add two things. We need to add the alarm receiver and the background service. So that can be done by the following: service Android name equals dot background service, and then we're also going to add a receiver. We're going to say Android name equals alarm receiver. Alright, so in theory, this should work out fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back into our terminal here. We're going to say ant debug and hope that we get no errors. We got errors because I am missing a semicolon on line 31 of the background service. So let's take a look here. 31. Yes, I think I do need a semicolon. Not there. Here because it's a considered a variable, I guess. So let's go ahead and try that again. And we have one more error on the onBind of the background service. So let's take a look up there. It looks, oh, that's because I did a dot. No dot. Common syntax typo. Alright, let's clear that. Let's try to run it again, or let's try to compile it again. And it built successful. So now I'm going to go ahead and run it, and with our fingers crossed, we are going to hope that it worked out. And then we're going to say example debug APK. Alright, it's installed, so let's check it out. Before I do that, let's go ahead and start our logcat. Alright, so hopefully in 15 seconds it'll say is running again because it'll have launched again. Let's go ahead and exit that out. And yes, it did. So our service, even though that our app is not opened, it is running every 15 seconds like we had said. So just to confirm, let's say that one more time. See it happen. And yes, it did happen. So you can see how easy it was to accomplish this. It required a decent amount of lines of code, but it was not difficult to accomplish. And in here, in our background service, we can get JSON data from web APIs and store it into our database. We can do all kinds of great stuff in this background. And because it's on an alarm, your battery life is preserved. It's not constantly running. It only runs when the alarm is triggered. It's not like it's running on a looping thread that is always constantly draining your battery. So it is good in that sense.